We hear constantly in the media all the time about how Tesla vehicles or some electric vehicles have been recalled and there's a class action going on. There's some big issue. The NHTSA says that they're unsafe, which obviously is untrue. I thought it was time that we actually had a look at some of the class action lawsuits going on at Kia, Hyundai, General Motors, and Ford right now, today. They're massive. They'll cost billions. And while Scotty Kilmer's ridiculous comments that saying that they're going to bankrupt all these different companies aren't actually true, it is true that it's going to cost them a lot of money. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. Great to see you. Thank you for tuning in. When you see the internals of an electric car, you realize just how incredibly simple they are. Yes, it's hard to make them in a way that's efficient and actually where you can make a profit because of the cost of the battery pack. But the truth is, the reality is, in many electric vehicles, in many electric products, they are incredibly simple. No transmission. And usually that means there's about 90% less moving parts. So many less things to actually go wrong. People are going to realize in probably 5 to 10 years that EVs are much more reliable than gasoline-powered cars. They are. But that will only get more so because the more money and the more time that companies have to actually work on making better electric cars, they will become more reliable. Gasoline-powered cars, unfortunately, are actually worse than you realize. And one of the key reasons for that is the media rarely reports on these class action lawsuits, the defects. They're so incredibly common. In fact, the only way I found out about some of these was by doing some research on them. There's barely any news stories about these massive cases. It seems like it's more interesting, according to the media, if a Tesla had a fender bender. Seriously, that's not even an exaggeration. So what's going on? Well, Hyundai and Kia here in Australia are in a bit of trouble. Not just in Australia though, they're also in a bit of trouble in the US. Korean car makers Hyundai and Kia are facing court action, this time at a federal level, meaning the entire Australian government is actually going after them over what lawyers are calling defective engines. Class actions have been filed in the Federal Court of Australia relating to the defective engines in various Hyundai and Kia vehicles sold in Australia from 2011 onwards. I'm talking about a lot of cars here. The action's being financed by UK-based litigation funder Woodsford, but represented by law firm Johnson Winter Slattery. Alleged the vehicles sold by Hyundai and Kia in Australia were offered for sale with engines that were manufactured or designed defectively. Now, the only reason that this has to go to court is because Hyundai and Kia aren't doing the right thing. These include the 4-cylinder Theta 2 MPI, the Theta 2 GDI, the Gamma 2 GDI, the new GDI petrol engines, a whole bunch of different engines. Anyway, if you've got a Hyundai and Kia, I hope it hasn't affected you because there's a good chance it has. As a result, it's claimed that these engines have the propensity to exhibit faults such as a sudden loss of power, including while driving, increased oil and fuel consumption, emissions of smoke, and in some cases fire. Yeah, so you're just driving along in your relatively new car and there's a whole bunch of emissions, a whole bunch of smoke coming out of your exhaust. Hyundai and Kia are saying, that's how they're intended to be. Do you think that when they did the emissions test, it was anywhere near those kinds of emissions, anywhere near that kind of pollution coming from the exhaust? Yeah. I don't think so. Now, it's claimed that Hyundai and Kia knew of these issues since 2015, but continued to sell the vehicles anyway. Sounds a lot like what Mercedes got caught for in China with their electric motors. We are determined to hold them to account and ensure that Australian consumers receive the compensation they are due, said the lawyers. We're pleased to have been selected to run this case. Hyundai and Kia were in the process of recalling millions of vehicles overseas for similar engine issues, say lawyers. They're saying this is happening all around the world. It's not just Australia. Well, this is actually happening in the United States, in North America as well. But there's another case that Hyundai and Kia are dealing with in North America. Class action attorneys say the software fix that Hyundai and Kia offered to protect vehicles it sold without immobilizers does not solve the problem for consumers whose cars were already stolen. Basically, in the US, if you buy a Hyundai or a Kia, your car is about 10 times more likely to be targeted by thieves because they know that they're really easy to break into. And customers for years have been saying, my car's been stolen 4, 5, 6 times. Seriously, people are actually having their car stolen multiple times. They're finding their car later on. Kind of comedic if it weren't such a crappy situation for many of these buyers. The software fix developed by Hyundai and Kia to protect vehicles it's sold without immobilizers doesn't work. It can be easily hot-wired. Thieves worked it out within a matter of hours that it didn't work. The lawyers in the US said, "We're thankful that Hyundai and Kia are recognizing that there's a problem, but the bell's already been rung. The fix does nothing to address the thousands of dollars that our clients have had to dole out to repair the damage caused to these vehicles after they've been stolen if they're able to recover their cars at all. So what about Ford? Well, Ford are in hot water as well. Ford have just recalled 1.3 million vehicles. 1.3 million. This is to add to a list of many millions of vehicles that have been recalled over the past 12 months. Unfortunately, Ford pays more money on warranty costs than any other company in the world. Ford are very well aware of this. The CEO has mentioned it. The reason they've brought in this new quality team is to try and prevent themselves from spending billions of dollars on fixing their cars. Now, don't get me wrong, I actually quite like Ford. I like the direction that they're headed in with EVs, lithium iron phosphate batteries, manufacturing those in the US, first big LFP factory to be built in the US. That's really exciting. That's great stuff. And unfortunately, they're going to have this thing hanging over their heads. It's sort of like, imagine walking around and you're doing the right thing. You're working as hard as you can to do the right thing, but at the same time, you're carrying a backpack that weighs 200 kilos. What does that do to your back within a couple of months? It knackers you. This is the kind of debt hangover Ford will have for many, many years to come, maybe decades to come. Ford has to recall 1.3 million vehicles in the US over a brake jounce hose that may fail prematurely due to a design flaw. The campaign will cover Ford Fusions, Lincoln MKZs, and a bunch of other cars. In the aftermath of the recall earlier that affected 2015 to 2018 Ford Edge and the Lincoln MKX, Ford discovered the same issue that had hampered the braking performance of those SUVs could also affect the above-mentioned sedans. This is in addition to the case that Ford obviously lost with the rollover protection of the F-Series trucks. They were sued for, I think it was about $1.4 billion they have to pay to the plaintiffs. People have been dying when the F-Series trucks roll over. There's not enough structural integrity in those vehicles. That was another case. That's a big one that Ford had to pay out. I'm not going to get into Fords. I did that in another video because you'll be so bored. There's so many of them, unfortunately. Sad as it is, I don't know why, I like Ford, but yeah, if you got a Ford car, I wish you the best. By the way, I had a Ford Focus. I loved it. It was an ST, this sort of mild hot hatch version. I loved it, but it was extremely unreliable, to be fair. Built in Europe, built in Germany, by the way. You'd think it'd be good quality, wouldn't you? But anyhow, a new class action lawsuit was recently filed against General Motors in regard to alleged oil consumption issues with the automaker's naturally aspirated 2.4 litre gasoline engine. Now, GM had a big recall in October for many thousands of cars. I think it was about 1.5 million. However, this is a new class action claiming that GM knowingly sold vehicles equipped with the atmospheric 2.4 litre engine despite knowledge of the engine's oil consumption issues. The lawsuit alleges that the engine introduces an excessive amount of oil into the combustion chambers, leading to low oil levels, low oil pressure, engine knock, and fouled spark plugs, among other issues. The strange part about this case is that General Motors knew about it. It sounds like they actually did know about it and did keep selling the vehicles. I mean, Mercedes did the same thing with their EQS. Their electric cars in China, which cost a lot of money. China's buyers of these electric vehicles in the country were furious that Mercedes knew about the case and kept on selling these vehicles. BMW did the same thing. They knew that their EVs had faulty batteries. They kept on selling them for many months afterwards. It was proven that they knew and just kept on selling them. I find it weird that automakers will do this kind of stuff, that they don't just go, as soon as they find out, halt production line vehicle sales, fix the issue, right? That's what Ford just did. Ford discovered somehow that they had issues with the battery packs in the F-150 Lightning. They paused the production line immediately, stopped producing the cars, fixed the issue, took them about a month, then they started producing them again. That's what automakers should do. It appears to me as though Ford now is making better decisions for the future of the company. Are other competitors doing the same thing? I don't know yet. I don't know. I do know Mercedes did that recently. They were caught for that by the Chinese government. It's true what happened. It's true they knew they were selling defective vehicles with defective motors for 9 months. Ford, good job. Mercedes, bad job. Let's see what happens in the future. What do you think about all these car ratings we're seeing claiming different brands having better reliability than others? Are they legit? Do they follow your experience? Do you agree with me that EVs will be more reliable in the future? That's my contention. That's my argument as well for why you should get an EV now and not a gas-powered car. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.